You all either already love Big Bend or you're hoping to fall in love with Big Bend. My name is Susan Sloan. I'm an REI outdoor school instructor. It's kind of a dream job. We're going to be headed to Big Bend in April with REI, and I definitely want to talk to you guys more about that later. I want to hear from you really quickly, either like you've been to Big Bend or you have a trip coming up. Just kind of tell me why you're here and what you're hoping to learn. I do have a PowerPoint slide presentation that we're going to watch today, but then I have a lot of materials and I want to have plenty of time to do a Q&A and answer all of your questions. So just tell me maybe your name and kind of what you're hoping to get out of this.
My name's Alex. We're planning a trip in April.
Okay.
So just kind of want to get an idea of what to do.
Nice. Hey, you guys, welcome. Come on in. No, we just started. If you don't mind, find your name and see if you could sign in back there. And then we're just kind of sharing name and like what you kind of hope to get out of this tonight or why you signed up.
Danielle, and I've been a couple times, done the winter trail and I think the South Ram.
Okay.
But I just was looking to do some more. I'm going back into camping in March.
Nice. Okay.
My name's Trent, and I'm planning a trip for about a month from now, so I'm just trying to get a better idea of everything.
What to do and what it's going to be like. Yeah.
I'm Ann, and I've been there several times, and it's really enjoyable.
Nice.
I'm Marcia. We're just starting to explore state parks and we thought we'd start with Big Bend.
Okay.
Same.
Same. Okay. Are you guys? We're a thing. And there is, so there's Big Bend National Park and then there's Big Bend State Park, which is literally across the street. I highly recommend both. And I'll talk a little bit about both tonight. So
I'm Blake, and I'm going first time in March.
March. Okay.
I'm Todd. Myself and him this year had tried to plan a trip last year, and as we approached the date, I realized that we didn't do enough planning. So we're going to try again.
This time we're ready. Nice. We'll start back here.
Ryan and Jen have a trip in June, just to get some ideas.
June. Okay, that's brave.
Not camping.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm Melissa. I went like a year ago.
Okay.
I had last one going again in March.
Nice.
I wanted to learn more.
Awesome.
I'm Tracy, and I'm in camping, and I'm in River State Park, so there's that.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Okay.
Oh, sorry. My name's Rachel. I'm going with friends in March, and I'm kind of not good at like planning it myself. I'm
Okay,
like an adventure
nice.
follower, and so
I know
I
you.
to learn to do the planning myself.
That's awesome. Okay.
I'm Tina. I'm one of her friends.
Okay. You're making her plan. Awesome.
I'm Matt. My father-in-law suggested going in August,
Okay.
and so I wanted to know how crazy that would
August is actually better than May or June.
Oh.
It actually, like, May is probably their worst, like the hottest, and then it actually kind of tapers. So, I mean, to get out of here in August and go, it's not usually that terrible. So,
I'm Ken, and just looking to find out more about Big Bend. Never been before.
awesome.
Maybe go in August.
Awesome. Nice. It's not so bad, I promise.
I'm Alan, and first trip in March.
In March?
With my
Okay.
wife.
Nice. All right, so as you're discovering pretty quickly, March and April are really, really popular times in the park. But we're going to talk about that too. Park's huge, and it's certainly not going to feel like Yellowstone or. So REI has a big partnership with the National Parks Foundation. Their centennial is this year. So they put together a little video, and we're going to watch it and get really pumped about going to the parks. So I'm going to turn off the light really quick.
Yeah. Places where fish swim and birds fly. Where mountains spread up and trees and grass grow all around. History is made, art is created, things happen that should always be remembered. Heroes emerge. A woman sets people free. A man makes light. A leader steps forward.
People get together. They help each other out. They make their own places to run and play and contemplate the universe. There's pride and gratitude and fun. It belongs to everyone. It can be a place, a feeling, a state of mind. So get up, get out there, and find your park. There are.
Alright. So we are going to talk about Big Ben. Alright, welcome, have a seat. Alright, so Big Bend. I've been there quite a few times, and I'm pretty excited because I'm actually leaving Wednesday to head back. So, like I said, we've got this presentation to go through, and then I want you guys to ask lots of questions, trails, what do I do on a 3-day trip, those kinds of things. First thing, getting there. I think that's one of the biggest hindrances to Big Bend National Park or State Park is that it just feels like it's in the middle of nowhere. It's really not that bad. It's about 474 miles from Austin, or about 8 hours. I have this drive dialed. My suggestion is, especially depending on the time of year, I'm not a huge fan of arriving at a campsite and setting up my tent, when it's pitch dark and dinner. My suggestion is leave Austin about 5 a.m. I know it sounds crazy, but if you leave at 5 a.m., it's 3 hours to Sonora. In Sonora, I know it sounds crazy, but you can actually stop at Caverns of Sonora and you can take a little cave tour, you can have breakfast, it's about 8 o'clock in the morning. You're so excited because you're about to head down I-10 and go on this amazing trip. After Sonora, it's about 2 hours to Fort Stockton. Fort Stockton has a playscape if you have kids and want to stop. There's also a pool, there's a historic district, you can stop there. After Fort Stockton, it's about an hour to a state park called Balmorhea. Balmorhea State Park puts Barton Springs to shame. It's a huge natural pool, same kind of thing like Barton Springs. It's swimmable year-round because the water temperature is constant. It is absolutely beautiful and worth a stop. So, you're all of about, you're 3, 4, 5, you're 6 hours into your trip now at Balmorhea. Stop for lunch because you left at 5 a.m., so it's only noon. After that, it's only about 2.5 hours to Big Bend. So, you've already had a cave tour, you've had breakfast, you've had lunch, and now you arrive in Big Bend about 3 o'clock. You set up your tent. You have time to go take a small hike. So, and then you go to bed because it's pitch dark at 8 o'clock at night, and then you wake up to these amazing, beautiful sunsets. So, basically, don't let getting there be a hindrance. It's not a bad drive. It's easily broken up. There's so many amazing things to do out in West Texas on the way. So, don't let that be a hindrance in any way. Pet restrictions. I would say leave Fido at home. Unless you have an RV camper or something like that, dogs, no pets are allowed on any of the trails. It's really not safe. We're going to talk about it, there are mountain lions, there are bears. So that is something to consider. As far as cost, there's a National Parks Pass available for $40. Actually, I think it may have gone up a little bit. Or $25 for a 7-day pass. And then as far as getting there, there's no public transportation to or in the park. Really, you're looking at, a personal vehicle. There are airports, or if you have a helicopter or something like that, then you're good. There is a private airport in Lajitas. Yeah, you're going to take this helicopter? Cool. There is a private airport in Lajitas, very small. It's an option, but again, once you get there, you're going to have to figure out some sort of transportation. So car is really the way to go. And okay, once you're there, Big Bend is huge. It's the 15th largest national park. It's a little over 800,000 acres. So that's kind of the hardest part is once you get there, you're so excited, and it's still probably another hour drive actually into into the main part of the park. So, and then once you're in the park, the speed limit does drop to 40, which is one of the reasons that drive, takes so long. Typically, I meant to go back. Like as far as how I get there from Austin, I mean, typically you come, you head through Fredericksburg, and then you come down I-10, and then you come 385, and 385 brings you through Marathon and up here through Persimmon Gap. And then this is the main park headquarters at Panther Junction. But like I said, so you're pretty excited, through here, you're, yay, I'm here. And then it's probably another hour drive, once you've actually entered the park until you get to Panther Junction. So now that you're here and you're at Panther Junction, the park is kind of divided into three main sections. And I think I'll say this later, but there's the Chisos Basin in the middle. And then you have Rio Grande Village, and then Santa Elena Canyon. All three very distinct aspects of the park. You have the mountains in the middle, you have this amazing river in the Rio Grande, and then you have, crazy desert. So it's a pretty amazing ecosystem that you're heading into. These little park roads, again, once you get here to Panther Junction, it's probably still another hour or so to Rio Grande, and then same over to Santa Elena. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I kind of want you to understand this idea of think of it as three separate little sections where you're up in the Chisos, or you're over in Rio Grande Village, or you're over in Santa Elena Canyon. And we'll kind of talk about all of that too. All right, human history of the park. People have been there for a really long time, since the 1500s. There's been ranching there, there's been mining there. In the 30s is when they decided to preserve it into a park, and I love this little picture. And then in 1944 is when it actually became a national park. If history is your thing, I highly recommend making, an effort and a stop at a place called Castellon. And I will show you, Castellon is right here on your way over to Santa Elena Canyon. Castellon was like a farming, just like a farming and trading company, but they preserved it really well. So there's several buildings that you can go in. They have an old trade store, La Harmonia, and you can walk in and everything still looks as it would have in the 20s. There's also a great ranger station there for kids. There's things that they can touch and play with, and then there's also restrooms, and they have Cokes and ice cream. So it's a really nice stop. If history is your thing, definitely you're gonna want to stop and get a feel for what it was like back in the 20s. Some of the natural highlights of the park. Definitely javelina. Most people that have been to Big Bend have definitely seen javelina. If you're lucky, you've seen a black bear. Pretty rare, but they're definitely there. And mountain lions, I'm cool with knowing they're there, but I really don't ever want to see one. We did actually get a chance to spot a black bear, and I think it's fairly common. And that's fun. You can go and report your sightings to the rangers, and they'll mark it on a map, and and you feel pretty safe. Big Bend actually has more types of birds, bats, and cactus than any other national park, which I think is kind of fun. And then you hear that phrase, Big Bend being described as a mountain island surrounded by a desert sea. And again, they're just referring to that idea of the Chisos being, in the middle and then surrounded by this desert. And then you also have the Rio. And then spring wildflowers. Pretty much everyone in here is going at this amazing time of year. Most of us around here love looking at the bluebonnets along the highway. So imagine that times 1,000. And it's a different bluebonnet than we have here, but they're absolutely beautiful. And typically they're just lining the roadways, lining the roadways on that drive down 385 and everywhere else. And then also the cactus. The cactus is also blooming. So amazing opportunities to go check out some wildflowers. Okay, eating and sleeping once you're there. I heard definitely some people say we're not camping, we are camping. So just like there's those 3 different areas of the park, there's 3 different camping areas. So there's camping up in the Chisos, there's camping in Rio Grande, and then there's camping over near Santa Elena Canyon in a place called Cottonwood. Hopefully everyone that's going in April has already figured out their lodging. Reservations are accepted November 15th through April 15th, and they are typically pretty booked up, especially in the Chisos. The Chisos is by far the most popular campground, and there's reasons for that. There's also the lodge in the Chisos Basin. Rio Grande Village has an RV campground, as well as a restaurant, which is nice if you get tired of dehydrated food or whatever you got. So there's that. We'll talk about that. As far as recreation and what to do, stargazing. Big Bend has been named one of the 10 international dark sky communities. I didn't even realize what a big deal that was. It's literally 10, and it's not like 10 in the US, it's 10 in the world. So definitely, like, you know, those of you that already have trips planned, I would go look at, you know, some sort of calendar and see what your moon situation is going to be. Because you could absolutely have some amazing stargazing on your hands. Most people on a moonless night will absolutely see the Milky Way, something, you know, if you spend the majority of your time in a city like Austin, you've never seen. So that's pretty amazing. Mountain biking is really only allowed, it's not allowed on any of the hiking trails, obviously, but there's plenty of unimproved dirt roads that if you don't have, you know, an amazing four-wheel drive vehicle, mountain biking is actually a really great way to go see those areas of the park. Obviously, there's lots of day hiking, there's backcountry camping, there's scenic drives, and then there's also river trips. And river trips can be self-guided, or there's outfitters that will take you out for half-day trips, full-day trips. But a trip to the river is definitely something I would suggest, you know, depending on time and all of that. And then, honestly, this is probably one of my favorite parts of the trip, too. Boquillas, kind of a little bit separate than the park, but definitely want to give you a little bit of history. So Boquillas is actually a tiny little town just across the border. And unfortunately, after 9/11, you know, Big Bend is a really unique property, too, just because it does, you know, have an international border. And after 9/11, the border was closed. And unfortunately, you know, the impact on that was that this tiny little town was pretty well decimated because tourism is all that kept it going. And so it was closed until April of 2013, and it just reopened. And that it's very official. You have to have a passport. I mean, that is something that you should know. You have to have a passport. Even kids have to have a passport. And, you know, it's only open, I think I have, oh yeah. So it's open Wednesday through Sunday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And that is really important. So if you're having such a great time at 6 p.m. and you try and cross the border and come back, it's going to be closed and you're going to have to spend the night. So definitely, you know, make sure if you do choose to go that you get yourself back across the border in plenty of time. It's a really unique experience, especially, you know, you can't think of anything really like it. You can pay on the U.S. side in Rio Grande Village, or you can just pay when you get there $5 for a little rowboat ride across the Rio. It's literally about 4 paddle strokes. Depending on water levels, you could probably just walk. And then it's about an $8 either donkey or horse ride. The town is about a mile away. You can kind of see it just ever so barely. This is the tiny little town of Boquillas, and this is actually the Mexico side, so these are the Sierra del Carmens. So it's about a mile, and you could also walk or take a truck. And then you actually have to go to immigration, and then you're free to tour the town. The town is about 6 buildings, 2 of which are restaurants. And then they're usually pretty proud. They want to show you like their new school, and they want to show you their new hospital, and they have hot springs. Like we'll talk about the hot springs on our side, but they actually have a hot springs too. And usually you just like, have a meal, tour the town a little bit, and then you get back on your horse and you come home. So it's just kind of think of it as like a fun half-day trip, and you get to come home and say, you went to Mexico. Very safe. We can talk about all of that again. Like their economy, everything about that town is based on tourists coming over. So if tourists stop coming over for any reason, again, like there's nothing there. So back in the park, up in the Chisos, I think someone mentioned they had done the window. This is actually a pretty famous Big Bend view. This is a view of the window. And this is a view of the window from the window overlook. So that's something I want you to know too. Like there's definitely some super strenuous multi-day hikes that you can go do in Big Bend, but they also have done a really great job of making the national park very accessible too. So this is from an overlook, an easily walk to paved overlook. It's a really popular spot for watching sunset. And then the restaurant is like right here. So is the lodge, if anybody's staying in the lodge. If you want, but up in the Chisos, these are kind of some of my favorite hikes. I mean, doing the window hike is a very iconic hike, and you hike through here, and you actually end your hike, at this like crazy, windy, scary precipice, and it's amazing and beautiful, and then you turn around and hike back out. But it is kind of one of those like must-do trails in Big Bend. The Lost Mine Trail is actually a really fun one to do, I think, on that day. I said get there at 3, set up your tent. You still have plenty of time to go do the Lost Mine Trail. It's only about a mile. It is quite a bit of like vertical elevation, but some of the most beautiful views of the park. Great for photography if you're into photos. So the Lost Mine Trail is another one, and a pretty quick, easy one. The South Rim is another one of those kind of, pinnacle, I'm going to do this. It can be done as a day hike. It's a pretty strenuous day hike. It's about 12 miles, or a lot of people choose to do that as an overnight. And it's just a backcountry camping, and we can talk about how to get permits and all that kind of stuff for backcountry camping. But that's another really fun one. And then Grapevine Hills. Grapevine Hills is actually it's like across from the Chisos, but it ends with this amazingly beautiful balanced rock formation. And again, like especially if you're with children or anything like that, it's a really relatively flat, easy to get to hike, and then at the end there's a little bit of rock scrambling and fun to actually get up to the balanced rock formation. But so up in the Chisos, these are kind of my favorite, go to hikes. Down in Rio Grande Village, so again we got like Chisos, then we got Rio Grande Village over here. So in Rio Grande Village, sunset over Boquillas Canyon, I actually think beats sunset at the window. Everybody talks about sunset at the window, but that first picture from the slideshow is actually, it's that photo, the second one too, is actually sunset at Boquillas. And that's a super, super easy, that's a hike from the campground, less than a mile, absolutely gorgeous. Obviously, like, if you have time, if you have an extra day to go do the Boquillas border crossing, I suggest going and doing it because it's just a super unique experience. And then, of course, the hot springs. The hot springs are on the way to Rio Grande Village, but worth a stop for a couple reasons. One, historically, like, the hot springs are a very historic place. People went there. There's ruins of several buildings and things that you can see. There's actually, I can't ever remember what they're called, and it's not like etched, but they're the painted ones, so pictographs, anybody, pictographs? Petroglyphs? I don't know, one or the other. along the hike that you can see. So definitely a lot of Big Bend history there, and it's just fun to go soak in the hot springs. Typically, it's pretty hot, that 115 degrees or so. But what's really fun too is to sit and soak in the hot springs, and then you can jump in the Rio, and then jump in the hot springs, and then jump in the Rio. So just kind of a fun little add-on there. Those of you going in like June and August and those kind of months, it can be really hot. I mean, that's something to discuss too. So temperature-wise, the Chisos is typically about 20 degrees cooler than Rio Grande Village or Santa Elena Canyon is going to be. So when you're looking at those temperatures, I went in May once. It was crazy, but it was fun too because we were some of the only people in the park. It was 115 degrees in Rio Grande Village, but we camped in the Chisos, and I am not a hot, camper. It was lovely and fine up in the Chisos, and we pretty much avoided Rio Grande Village because it was so hot, but we did go to Santa Elena Canyon and do a paddle trip, and again, like as long as you could stay in the water and, stay in the shade, we were fine. But that's something to consider. There's a huge temperature difference between being up in the Chisos and being down either in Rio Grande Village or Santa Elena Canyon. So Santa Elena is the other one. Santa Elena is a pretty iconic picture that you're used to seeing of Big Bend. I think a paddle trip, like I said, if you have time, it's not necessary to bring your own gear. There's gear rentals in Terlingua. It is a bit of a drive. You're probably going to drive about an hour and a half out of the park in order to get, your canoe or kayak, or depending on water. And then it's going to be an hour and a half drive back into the park. So I think what we did was went out one night and got the canoe, came back in, did the paddle trip the next day, and then as we were leaving, dropped it back off. I'm going to show you on my big map in a minute. Is there a picture? No. I'm going to show you on my map my route as far as driving through the park. But things to do in Santa Elena, definitely, if you can, figure out a way to take a paddle trip to Fern Canyon. That's about as far as you can paddle without having some sort of river knowledge. You can do huge multi-day river trips on the Rio Grande, but you do encounter rapids and things like that. So, the trip to Fern Canyon is a trip for anybody. There is a bit of portaging usually depending on water levels, but it was all fine and easy and doable. And the canyon that you end at is absolutely beautiful. And then you paddle back, and that's a half-day paddle trip. Obviously, I talked about stopping in Castellon, and then we're going to talk about this Old Maverick Road in a minute, but that's the way that I would suggest leaving the park is this is day whatever you have, go to Santa Elena Canyon and then leave the park out the Old Maverick Road to Terlingua. So nearby attractions, we mentioned this state park. Big Bend Ranch State Park is literally across the street from the national park. It's very, very different. It's much more rustic. If anybody is interested in going there, we can talk a lot more about it. Mountain biking is huge in the state park. That's actually what we're headed to do. There's a huge mountain bike festival that starts on Wednesday. It's based out of Lajitas. Lajitas is another town just outside. There's a huge, crazy golf course and resort there. So if you're, tired of sleeping in your tent, you can always go stay at the Lajitas Resort. There's a spa, restaurant, everything. Marfa, of course, most people have heard of Marfa if you're from Austin. Definitely worth, a quick stop. There's if you're into art in any way, there's the Judd Foundation and all kinds of fun art things that you can see. Fort Layton is another state historic spot. I think it's pretty fun. It's a historic, really well preserved fort in West Texas. Terlingua is just this crazy kooky place that everybody should go, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then, of course, we already talked about Belmarais State Park, amazing. So, okay, a few other things. Park partners, Big Bend Natural History Association, Friends of Big Bend, Volunteers in the Park, all sorts of things that you can go and do to get excited about Big Bend. Lots of classes coming up. If you do plan on doing multi-day backpacking, anything like that, I would highly recommend taking a class, The Prep for Big Bend. It's a hands-on, we're going to show you everything that you need to know in order to be safe. First-time campers, there's camp stoves and water filtration. If you're into photo, travel photography, backcountry navigation, map and compass. Again, if you're planning on doing some of that backcountry stuff, I highly recommend these classes. I will say, it is a concern of people, any of those trails that I mentioned to you, the Lost Mine Trail, the window, they're all very, very well marked. I mean, I'm really bad. I mean, I would never bring a compass or anything like that. I do typically have at least a map, but they're all very, very well signed and marked. It's more when you choose to get out of those well-populated trails that you need to start to prepare to take care of yourself a little bit more. Okay, so now is my favorite part. Questions. I want to talk about your specific trips and answer all kinds of questions. And then I have lots of stuff up here. Oh, and I also want to show you kind of my driving plan too, as far as getting around in the park. I also highly recommend this map. I mean, I really do. They're going to give you, when you enter the park, they're going to give you a little newspaper, the Paisano. It's great. I mean, again, we want to plan a little better than just showing up and reading their paper. But it does have, the hours of the visitor centers and all that kind of stuff. But, and it is a great resource. The map is really nice, and this is a good one. It's the Nat Geo map. It's got the big blow up on the back, especially if you're planning on doing some backcountry camping. You can start to get an idea of actual sites that you might want to choose. Typically, other than that, it's going to be assigned. If you say I'm staying in the Chisos, you don't get to pick really usually where you're staying, unless they're doing a first come first serve kind of thing. But just to explain a little bit more, let me orient myself here real quick. Okay. So I talked a little bit about that old Maverick Road, and something to understand is on the way to Santa Elena Canyon, this is a one-way road. And I'm not a huge fan of driving 40 miles an hour on the same road multiple times. So when I come in, I would come in and head towards the Chisos, typically. I mean, most likely, is everybody camping in the Chisos? Or, yeah, no, where are you guys camping? Rio Grande, okay. So it'll just be a little different. But typically I would kind of head up to the Chisos, or you guys will head over to Rio Grande. But I would do these two things first, do the Chisos and do Rio Grande first. Then you do Santa Elena typically on the way out. Unless you have specific needs for photos or whatever, I would do Santa Elena on the way out. There's an amazingly beautiful drive. It's the Ross Maxwell Scenic Drive. And there's all sorts of little pull-offs, and there are some little hikes and things, the mule ears that you can do off of this drive. But when it ends at Santa Elena Canyon, one of your only choices is to just turn around and do the drive back. So in order to avoid that, depending on your vehicle and depending on road conditions, I highly, highly, highly recommend taking a road called the Old Maverick Road out. And it's a 14-mile, it's an improved dirt road. But again, how often do we even get to drive on fun dirt roads? Not very often. And there's some really beautiful scenery to see on the way and some fun little historical things to stop at. And then it's going to end, and connect back up in here and get you back into Studio Butte or wherever you might be going, I recommend heading this way and then heading into Terlingua. I mean, it's just a really nice way to end a trip. Head into Terlingua. There's a restaurant there that usually has live music. 9 times out of 10, it's somebody from Austin, playing the guitar. There's this place called The Porch where everybody just sits and plays music and, has a cold beer. But staying there, have dinner. You can even stay in the town of Terlingua if you want. There's everything from like bottom of the barrel motel to like a nicer place that I would recommend. Or there's campgrounds and lots of other things that you can stay there. And then one of my favorite parts about leaving that way too is instead of leaving out 385 back towards Marathon, which is how you would come in, I recommend leaving and driving through the state park. You leave and head towards Presidio. So you leave down this 170 and you end up, and I believe like Texas Monthly and lots of other places have said it is the most beautiful drive in all of Texas. So you end up driving towards Presidio and then up through Marfa. And it does add about an hour and a half to your drive, but it's because you're seriously stopping every 5 minutes to say like, stop, it's so beautiful, stop, it's so beautiful. And if you want to go to Marfa, it's also a really nice way to kind of add Marfa in. But if you leave the park and kind of do all this, just to give you an idea, like typically you're going to end up in Marfa around lunchtime. So again, like stop in Marfa, have lunch, and you're still going to be home by like 7 or 8, which is doable to my brain and needing to go to bed. So leaving, come in through the 385, down through Marathon, which means you also get to see Marathon, and then leave out this way to drive through the state park and then up through Marfa. So that's just kind of my recommendation on that whole how to deal with all of that. All right, questions.
So the challenge that I have is
Yeah.
being able to proportion time for the places that you're going. So, for example, back in August when I was planning on going with a partner, we made a reservation at Jesus Mountains at the Lodge,
Okay.
but there are no other reservations that were made at this point.
Yeah.
Also, at the time that we made the reservations, there was still a place in Alpine that you could rent a park. You were taking the train out through, going from the train that leaves Austin to go to Los Angeles.
Okay.
But now that there's no car rentals there anymore, so everything is like up in the air, and it's like how you figure out how much time to spend in Los Chisos and how much time here and how to coordinate that.
It's hard. I mean, I would start with, how much time do you have? I mean, I have literally driven people through Big Bend in a day. I mean, which sounds brutal, but it is one of those, like, I want you to see every part of this park. So I'm going to drive in, I'm going to head to the Rio Grande, we're going to go to that overlook that you saw, we're going to stop at the hot springs, then we're going to come over here, we're going to go up into the Chisos, we're going to wave at the window, that's about it, and then we're going to head this way. We're going to stop at Santa Elena and probably go, hike up into Santa Elena a little bit, take the old Maverick Road and end up in Terlingua in time for dinner. I mean, that's Big Bend in a day. It's not what I recommend because it is definitely like, it's a lot of driving. And then it's also just like barely touching these highlights. If you have, 2 or 3 days, I would say, do you know yourself well enough to know, like, I really like high desert and I want to feel like I'm in the mountains? I would definitely say, spend 2 days in the Chisos and maybe just do this as a 1-day drive.
1 day to Rio and then 1 day to Santa Elena.
I mean, really, like, if you had 3 days, I would say spend 2 full days in the Chisos. And then on that last day, I would drive to Rio Grande, just like check out the hot springs, check out, some of the views on the drives. That's pretty much it. You're going to see Boquillas Canyon and then you're gonna get back in the car and you're gonna head over towards Santa Elena. And it's not like, I know I keep talking about this drive, it's not like this drive isn't absolutely beautiful, but I mean, again, like, we just don't, how much time do we want to spend, in our cars? And it's typically like a windows down, you're going 40. So it's a beautiful drive, but it is, it's a long drive. And then for the Ross Maxwell part, so we're assuming like second half of the day kind of thing. There are lots of places to stop and get out and see overlooks. You just don't get like the in-depth. But that would be the way to do that if you had like 3 days. So if you had, if you're telling me you have 4 days, then I'm going to say you need to be thinking about, do I want to do a paddle trip? Or do I want to go to Boquillas? Or do I want to do 2 nights on the South Rim? Or do an overnight 2 days, do an overnight on the South Rim. I mean, a lot of that is just up to you. What are you most interested in doing? I really want to do a backpacking trip, or I want to do a paddle trip, or, I have to go to Boquillas.
So that's really helpful, because if you're saying if you're going to spend 4 days and it's a 6-day trip, because you're spending a day traveling
Yeah,
and a day coming back.
exactly.
And that the time travel for going from the Rio Grande out to the more western part of the park would take how long?
I mean, I actually had it like written down. I'm gonna look. It's longer than I think usually. So it's a 2.5-hour drive.
Okay.
So it's 24 miles. It's 24 miles from the Chisos Basin to Rio Grande Village. So that's about an hour. And then it's apparently 36 miles through this hole from the Chisos down through the Ross Maxwell Scenic Drive. So another like hour and a half. So I mean, you're looking at a 2.5-hour drive.
So it's going to San Marcos and Russia.
Yeah.
So what about,
Way prettier. Yeah.
what about the importance of an all-wheel drive and a 4-wheel drive and are there places around that one can rent an
Yes.
all-wheel drive versus a truck?
So I would say for any of these roads that I'm talking about, 4-wheel drive, not necessary at all. There are some amazingly beautiful backcountry roads that can be, accessed with a 4-wheel drive vehicle. There's also, there are some parts of the park that you just aren't going to get to see without that. One, I would say if you do have a 4-wheel drive vehicle, Ernst to Naha is over here somewhere. It's like right here. It's near Rio Grande Village. Depending on road conditions, really you just need like a high clearance vehicle. You don't have to have 4-wheel drive to access this section of the Old Ore Road. Same again, like with the Maverick Road, they do a pretty nice distinction between improved dirt roads and 4-wheel drive vehicle roads. Grapevine Hills that I talked about, Grapevine Hills is actually off an improved dirt road, but it's only like 8 miles or so. And then again, that old Maverick Road, just to give you an idea, I've been there multiple times, and apparently I like to buy and sell cars. So I've done that in a Mini Cooper. Probably not the best idea, honestly, like looking back. I think I was pretty happy that we finished. But, a Honda Element, and then we have a Tacoma now, that's fine. But, I would just ask the rangers. They're probably going to be pretty cautious, but they'll let you know if there's been like a major rain or flood event and like you really shouldn't, like something's washed out and the road isn't accessible. But other than that, I mean, there's no need to have it. If you do, it definitely opens up parts of the park that aren't going to be accessible without it. As far as renting, actually, I really don't know that much about renting, but in Studi Butte, and in Terlingua, there are outfitters that will definitely do tours that will take you on some of these backcountry roads. And that might be a really nice way to do it also, because nothing would make me sadder than, finding out you're on the River Road East and your four-wheel drive breaks down. Water out here is pretty well non-existent. I mean, that's something like people are used to going on a 4-day backcountry camping, in Colorado with their, life straw, and they're good to go. And I'm like, your life straw is useless here. There is no water. There's just none. So water is a huge consideration anytime you leave to go camping, and it's a huge limit to what you can do as far as multi-day backpacking. There are a few multi-day backpacking recommended trips, and you have to cache water. So before you would ever go hike, you're gonna go put your water in the water cache, and I would feel very safe that it will remain there until you get back. But again, you don't want to end up in your four-wheel drive vehicle in a place where you don't have enough water, and now you're hiking, and so something to think about. Maybe go with a tour group, something like that. But it would allow you to see parts of the park that you wouldn't see otherwise. So, yeah. Good questions. More questions? Yeah.
Yeah, can you explain kind of the backcountry permit process?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's not too bad. So everything else is pretty much reservation. Backcountry permits are first come, first serve. It's not that big of a deal. Typically, so for the South Rim or something like that, you're gonna show up and say, hey, I wanna go overnight backcountry. It's pretty fun. They actually have a book in Panther Junction, and it has photos, and it'll say campsite, whatever. And it'll have a little photo and show you where it is on the trail. And you just kind of flip through the book and you say, I like that one. You do have to pick for a significant portion, all of this, any of these campsites that are marked, you actually do have to pick before you leave. And you're gonna say, I picked this campsite, and they're gonna give you a permit for that campsite, and you just attach it to your pack or whatever, and you go, and it's no big deal. They also do have something called zone camping, and it's the same basic idea, but Big Bend, there's certain areas where zone camping is not allowed. Typically up in this main part of the Chisos, you are not allowed to zone camp. The only places you're allowed to camp are in these designated, camping spots. But outside of these designated camping spots, you can see any of this. Well, minus that. I don't know. It's kind of hard. You can do something called zone camping. And basically it's the same thing, you just say, I'm going to be in zone 303 this night, and they're going to give you a permit that says, that says you're there. Yeah.
So you said first come, first serve for these permits. Is that at location, at the radio station, or
Yes.
is that online before you get there? Okay.
It is I'm standing there, I'm here, and ready to go backpacking. I mean, and you don't have to do it. Actually, I think they are valid, so it's not like you have to get there and go immediately. But you can get there and say tomorrow, or I don't actually remember how long they're valid. But they're valid for a couple days, so you could show up. Yeah, it doesn't even say. Oh, here we go. Oh, it's only 24 hours in advance. So I mean, pretty much you could show up and say, tomorrow I'm gonna leave and go. Zone camping is pretty much, there's rules for zone camping, camp away from water. Definitely don't ever go be hey, let's be neighbors. Camp away from other campers, things like that. Probably not an issue, as far as running into people. I would say if you get into something like zone camping, you're on your own. I mean, you're gonna definitely feel very, very isolated, which is nice. That's back to the whole the fact that pretty much everyone in the room said they're going in March or April. The fun part about how huge the park is the campgrounds can maybe start to feel a little bit crowded, but as soon as you go hike, I mean, I was there over Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving again is one of those crazy, crazy popular times of year. And we went and did the window hike, and we didn't see anyone all day. So it's one of those, as soon as you kind of, everybody disperses into their areas, or a lot of people are, just there and they're hanging out in their RVs and like they're not out hiking during the day. So it feels really nice. Like even if it feels maybe a little crowded in the actual campgrounds, the rest of the time you're definitely gonna feel like you have some space. Does that answer your question, sort of?
Do you have any recommended backcountry trips if you're going for, say, 2 nights?
So the most popular, South Rim, I would say, if you're fit and all of that, I say probably do it in a day, unless you really want to practice backcountry camping, then definitely do it as a 2-day or as an overnight. The one that can be done as a 2-day and is typically done actually as a 3-day is the Outer Mountain Loop, also part of the Dotson Trail. It's on here. As soon as I orient. So here it is. So basically what the Dotson Trail does is it takes this part of the South Rim, and I know this is nearly impossible to see, but so the South Rim is actually right here up in the Chisos. So what the Dotson Trail does is it actually hikes you from the Chisos down into the desert and then around. You have to cache water. Typically people cache water over here by the Homer Wilson Ranch. So you can kind of see, so you can kind of do this as a 1-day, 2-day, and then back. You could do this as a 2-day. It's a lot, but still really fun. And you just absolutely have to cache water.
Would you say that's a rigorous?
Very.
And one that would be more reasonable?
So more reasonable is to just do the South Rim.
Sure.
The South Rim isn't overnight, is a really, really fun, first backpacking adventure.
That's an 11-mile trip, right?
It's about 12, yeah. Not including, when you're on the South Rim, you can actually hike up Emery Peak. And Emery Peak is the high point, at 9,000 feet or something. But it is the highest part of the park. So when you're on the rim, you can actually take a little side trail, and here it is. You can actually hike up Emery Peak and then continue on. So
if you do the South Rim Trail as a 2-day,
mm-hmm.
You would need to get a permit before you do that, correct?
Yeah, you would go and it's not like the zone kind of permit, you would actually go pick out your actual camp spot, which is fun too. I mean, like I said, they give you that book and it's pretty well marked, and you can decide oh, I want day 1 to be longer, or oh, I want to get there and relax and have day 2 be longer or something. So, I mean, you can choose, exactly, or I want to camp, on the rim, or oh, I want to camp over in the forest, or, so that part's fun, but that is definitely a designated, you're going to show up. Now, I wouldn't worry even in April, I don't think, about these being full. I mean, I think Texas Monthly might have put a couple of them as this is the best camp spot in the whole world. Those are probably taken. Or unless you just get there at just the right time, but yeah.
Are there any other good recommended overnight trails outside of the Chisos?
Yeah, there's one, again, water becomes a huge issue, but there's a trail you can do called Marufa Vega over in Rio Grande Village. And if you like the desert, this is a really beautiful, fun trail. Just like backcountry camping, you won't see a soul. Yeah, so that's a pretty fun one.
How long would you estimate that to be, and is that rigorous?
Marufa Vega, I've forgotten. I'm gonna look it up really quick.
It's Marufa Vega?
Yeah. So, 14 miles. and they're calling it strenuous. But it's a beautiful one. It's just different. It's very different than anything that you're gonna see up in the Chisos. And again, like water is definitely an issue. I mean, that's just straight up a desert hike. I'm trying to think. Those are pretty much my favorites.
What about just a day? Because we've done the
Yeah.
South Rim together, like
Okay.
in one day, but then my husband wants to do the South Rim and then also go check out Juniper Canyon because he was talking about the springs. But I don't know if that's doable in a day. Have you done any Juniper Canyon off the South Rim?
So like that starts to kind of like add into that.
It's like the outer loop.
Yeah, it starts to add in that outer loop.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's totally up to you. I think like just the South Rim in a day it's a day. I mean, it's a day hike. It's a full day of tired feet, and I want ice cream when I'm done. So
Is Juniper? Have you done Juniper Canyon?
I have not. Yeah, I have not.
I'm not too thrilled on it either.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
I don't know.
I'm good with the South Rim.
I mean,
Any other just good day hikes besides if I've done anything other than
have you done everything else that I already mentioned?
Mhm.
Yeah.
all
Because
the
they're all like
popular ones?
they're all like the super. You know, I mean, honestly, like, do you like the desert?
I like the cheese.
Okay. I mean, yeah, you've done a lot of it. You know, if you.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know
the-
if there's some secret like hidden one that
there's like.
that was a
Well,
Super
depending
popular.
on like driving too. There's one at the end of Persimmon Gap. That's pretty fun. I'm gonna have to find it though. But again, like that is more like it's
Down
more
there.
deserty.
Okay.
Yeah.
South Rim is super cool, so
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you recommend any special guidebooks or anything like that?
You know, honestly, like, these little guidebooks are like, it's $1.95 in the park, and these are great little books. You know, they even have simple photos. They have, you know, great markers. I mean, I think these are great. Bought in the park. I mean, I've just kind of collected stuff over the years. You know, this is a pretty decent one too, just like a hiker's guide. They offer at a lot of the trailheads, you know, they'll say like, oh, give us $1 for the printing or whatever, but most of them are going to have, you know, some sort of pamphlet like this when you start the hike, which is also nice because they tend to include, you know, flora and fauna that you're going to see, so that can be really helpful. Other than that, like, I recommend the big map. But other than that, I mean, unless you just want a book for, like, history or something, probably not necessary.
When you talk about a day hike on the South Rim,
Yeah,
it takes 12 miles one way, 12 miles back. Are we talking about 12 miles?
it's 12 miles total.
Okay, so 66. So it is
Yeah.
a day hike.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah, 12 total. But again, it's 12, you know, there's elevation and all of that. Plus, you're just going to want to stop and take photos and all of that. But yeah, so they're going to call it like a strenuous day hike, 12 miles. And strenuous, like, of course, like, all of that is relative to, like, your fitness, your, you know, just everything. I will say we did it once with our packs on. Weather was terrible. Like, I think we were just fussy. And so with full, like, packs and everything, we said, forget it, we're going back. And just, so we hiked the whole thing, you know, with full packs. And I don't recommend that. You know, if you're going to hike it as a day hike, I would definitely hike it, you know, with just your water and some snacks. First aid, let's talk about that. First aid. You know, we mentioned the bears, we mentioned the mountain lions. Let's talk about snakes and cactus and all of those other things. I mean, having like a decent first aid kit is definitely recommended and huge. Also, you know, as far as major medical emergencies, those kinds of things, you know, Alpine is the closest hospital. when something terrible happens, you're going to end up being evacuated or getting yourself somehow to Alpine. Just something to keep in mind as far as like staying within your limits. All of those things are important, and also, before you decide, I'm going to go hike the outer loop, and not understanding the water needs or the temperature difference between, I left the Chisos this morning and it was 60 degrees and beautiful, but now it's the afternoon, and what do you mean it's 115 degrees? So just those kinds, keeping those things in mind will help make your trip a lot better.
In terms of communications,
Yeah.
which communities will you be able to use the phone in? Because I was told you don't have access to phones at all.
That's a great question. Thank you. Pretty much the moment you enter the park, or even honestly, like before, you've got no internet and no cell service. Satellite radio becomes your friend, or good CDs. You've got nothing through any of this. Rio Grande Village is the only spot. There's payphones at Rio Grande Village, and your Wi-Fi will work. I have AT&T though. I don't know about anybody else, but AT&T, Wi-Fi. I actually went to Boquillas and spent the night and did all of that, and I had, told people, when I get back, when I get to Rio Grande Village, I'll text you and let you know that I'm back. So that was just kind of the plan. So Rio Grande Village, only place with showers, coin-operated showers, laundry, payphone, and actually there might be a payphone. There might be a payphone somewhere else, but I mean, we all have cell phones. But cell service in Rio Grande Village, that is it. Very good. Very good. Yes, ma'am.
Besides March and April, when is a good time to visit the park, temperature-wise?
November, October, November. December, it's starting to get pretty cold. But October and November also, like, those are probably the two, like, most popular. October, November, March, and April, most popular times in the park by far. And then, spring break, of course, March. But yeah, and it's different, but temperature-wise, just absolutely beautiful. Not probably as crowded as spring unless you start hitting on the holidays like Thanksgiving or even Christmas. So
basically, what I heard you say is that if you're going to do an overnight, 6 days is ideal with travel. If you're not doing overnight, 5 days would be ideal without stretching it.
yeah,
And not to be intimidated by the 8-hour car ride you got.
don't be intimidated by the car ride. Caverns of Sonora is really fun. Caverns of Sonora is a great place to stop. I know it seems crazy that you would add an hour and a half to your drive. It's just not that big of a deal. And also, if you want to skip that, also stopping at Valmarais is it's a great spot to stop and have lunch and take a swim, and then you get back in the car and you feel all refreshed. And then it's 2 hours to Big Bend, which is nothing, right? I mean, so if you just kind of forget the other 6 hours you've already been in the car, all of a sudden your 2-hour drive is nothing. And if you have a Texas State Park Pass, even if you only stay I only stay, 45 minutes or an hour, and then it's free. So. I hope everybody's crazy excited to go. I'm trying to think if there's more.
What's the nights like in March? Is it get pretty cold still?
Yeah, I mean, you're probably looking at high 30s, 40s. I actually, since I have not memorized this, I have my handy cheat sheet. So here's that difference too between the two. So Chisos Basin, March is actually a high of, that can't be right. I guess it is. That's not right. They're saying 96 for the high and 36 for the low.
And that's in March?
Yeah, that seems crazy. But I would probably guess it's a little less than that. I don't know. But the difference being, so that's up in the Chisos, and then what they have for Castellon is 105 and 41. So February they have 85 and 29 versus 96 and 36, 97 and 36.
About October.
Pretty much the same, like just so October is pretty much the same as March. November is a little cooler. November's pretty much the same as February. Yeah, so I mean, like nighttime temperatures, you're looking at that like 36, 40. I mean, I've been checking the temperatures. So in the state park, it's in the state park on Wednesday. It's supposed to be like high 70s and then lows in the 40s, which to me is like perfect. You know, it definitely doesn't get too warm during the day, and then nighttime temperatures are just perfect for camping. I mean, you definitely have to do the whole layering thing. You know, if you're camping, when you wake up in the morning, it's going to be chilly, and then as you go throughout the day and hike, you know, you just kind of start to take off your layers, and then at night you start to put it back on. There are, like, I've gone to some really amazing ranger programs at night, too. Sometimes I think they're advertised online. I think sometimes a lot of them are spur of the moment, who's around, and, you know, what do they want to talk about. But we went to one on one of the Texas Rangers, and it was really fascinating and totally worth going to. So think about that, too. Lots of little ranger programs. Or again, like kids, they have an amazing junior ranger program. Definitely look into that.
So in addition to just having layers for cold
Yeah.
and warm, in addition, what would be, let's say, 5 or 6 things that you would consider crucial necessities to pack with you from here to take with you?
I mean, it depends again. Like, are you staying in the cabins? Are you camping? Those kinds of things. Water is number one. I mean, you just, whatever you need in order to get water in you, looking at those temperatures, even I would say make sure you have some sort of electrolytes. First aid kit, just have a basic first aid kit because you should. Even with like good boots and pants, you know, just like the slightest step off the trail and you could very easily have just stepped into a huge cactus. You know, so a first aid kit with some tweezers and some Neosporin could really help, you know, make a trip not so bad. I can't live without coffee, so I definitely make sure I have my little French press. But
I have one too.
it's a camping French press. But you gotta have that. That's about it.
So what would be a half gallon per person per day?
One gallon. I mean, it should be a full gallon per person per day.
Okay.
And that's again, like that's assuming that you're like headed out on the South Rim, or even, you know, if I was gonna go do the Lost Mine Trail or something like that, you know, Camelback, like, you know, just carrying around like a Nalgene full of water or something isn't always the easiest. Sometimes, you know, having some sort of bladder, you know, backpack, day pack, you know, you've got as you're shedding your layers, you can put it in your day pack, plus you've got your bladder. And then what's nice about that too, versus a bottle, is you're constantly sipping, you know, just like little sips throughout the day just to help, you know, make sure there's no dehydration issues. I do not recommend putting electrolytes in a bladder. That's bad. I mean, mostly just for cleanup. And if you're really good about cleaning it out, it's fine. Most people aren't, and you'll just ruin it.
Easy way to clean it on the trail?
No, because like water is such an issue out there. Like it's not like you can like dump it out and clean it. I will say, even when you're camping and doing dishes, they do have by the restroom facilities, you know, small little like a kitchen area kind of. It's just like a sink, and you can rinse your dishes and throw your scraps away and all of that. There's signs everywhere reminding you that you're in the desert and water is crazy precious. Which totally reminds me, does everybody know the Big Bend was just on fire? Okay, so we didn't really talk about that too much. So the fire broke my heart, and I was really, worried. The fire, thankfully, like was nowhere near the Chisos. That would be devastating. Water is so precious, and lack of manpower, I think, was a huge part of fighting the fire too. So they have a group called Los Diablos that come over from Mexico with an agreement. They come over and help fight, and we had people, I think, all the way from New Mexico that came and helped. I think the final number I heard was like 1,700 acres, like somewhere around there, were burned, and it was all over in this area, over kind of north of Rio Grande Village. But I know the old ore road was shut down, and these roads, were shut down, and they were definitely mostly concerned about people that would have been like backcountry zone camping and potentially stuck back here. So, just making sure that these people were safe. They closed this. This is actually one of the bike rides that we're supposed to do on Thursday. So I'm really curious to see, the damage from the fire. So definitely something to know about if you are out backcountry camping. I know it feels like, but I'm in the desert, and but when something catches, and wind out there can definitely, if you're camping, if you're in an REI tent, you'll be fine. But I've seen people's tents, tent poles break. 50-mile-an-hour gusts up in the Chisos, things like that. So making sure your stuff is staked out, pretty important. But I think that's, it was like a down power line, heavy winds, and then thankfully the weather conditions changed, and it was humid, and all of that helped, prevent the spread. But
what about cooking at the camp at Chisos camping? Is there a freestanding grill, or is there fire?
Yeah, so typically you're just gonna have it's car camping up in the Chisos, which is nice. So you can have, your fancy, dual burner Coleman stove, and make bacon and eggs in the morning, or some sort of more backpacking type stove system. I'm sure there's fire bans and other things. Typically any sort of, self-contained system like that, you're gonna be fine. I'm gonna guess there's like 0 grand fires happening here. Yeah.
This might be a silly question
No.
because of desert things,
Yeah.
but how likely is hammock camping outside of, would it be just in the Chisos or not at all?
I don't even think you could in the Chisos,
Yeah.
I'll be honest. Actually, Rio Grande Village is probably better, or Cottonwood. We didn't even really, Cottonwood's like the, in Cottonwood you probably could, but nobody camps there. So Cottonwood is actually over here by Santa Anita Canyon. If I was gonna do like a multi-day paddle trip, or if I knew I was spending a lot of time over here, I might camp in Cottonwood. And of course, Cottonwood, named after the trees, you could definitely hammock camp there. In Rio Grande Village, some of the campsites are treed, and you could potentially do that. Other than that, it's just pretty flat. Definitely like along the outside of Rio Grande Village, there's probably some good spots where you could set up a hammock. In the Chisos, it's actually probably the hardest, just kind of because of the way the campground is set up. But yeah.
In terms of the traveling on the Rio Grande, sort of road trips, is that for mild, moderate, or more city tents, or river rafting?
So that first section, like the first several miles of the trail, and I even have like a river guide too, and it has various like mileage and things like that. And I'm not much of like a paddler by any means, but that first section is totally doable by anyone. It's super chill paddling. Depending on water levels, there is, like I said, quite a bit of portaging. They typically are going to rent you a canoe in low water levels. And then it's beyond that they start to talk about, class whatever rapids and those kinds of things. and that's when you need to know what you're doing. Again, there's two big outfitters. There's Desert Sports and can't even think of the other one, like Far Flung is one of the other ones. And they do great, they'll do full day paddle trips, half day paddle trips. They'll feed you lunch and take care of you. And then you could go, much, much farther. Yeah.
Important to make those in advance or just those?
I would probably start calling now and seeing if you want a guided trip, I would make those reservations well before you arrive. Just taking a boat out on your own, you could probably just show up, and most likely they're gonna have something for you to take. But then, yeah, you got to think about like your car, and again, like it's a bit of a drive. We went from the Chisos into Terlingua, picked up the boat, drove back, and camped in the Chisos with the boat, and then went, the next day and did the whole, did the paddle trip, and then we left the old Maverick Road back, delivered the boat, and then actually stayed. There's a beautiful little 4-room hotel in Terlingua called La Posada Milagro. If you've been kind of dirtbag camping for 4 days and you want a nice place to stay, I would have dinner at the Starlight, and then you can stay there. And then there's also a couple of other just motel type places that you can stay in Terlingua, as well as lots of camping. Or again, there's the huge resort in Lajitas too, which is kind of a fun way sometimes to end your trip. Come in, camp, do all your stuff, and then take a nice shower and before you head home and stay in town. Definitely. Please fill out evaluations. Let us know. More classes that should be offered, more information. Those of you going to Big Bend in April, REI is actually going to be there. We're going to be there the 21st through the 24th, and we're actually going to be teaching classes in Big Bend. We're going to be doing a night sky photography class April 23rd. We're going to be doing mountain biking. We'll probably mountain bike the Old Door Road. So you might get lucky, and it is kind of one of those things, there's not much pre-sign up. It's just going to be hey, REI is here, come hang out with us, take a class. I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of promos and giveaways for REI members. So if you're there, then good choice of dates. We're going to be there April 23rd, I think, is this Saturday, and I know there's going to be a lot of classes and programs going on that day, but we're going to be there 2 days before and 2 days after, and that's all part of just the Big Bend Centennial. Bob Bullock Museum is about to do a huge thing on Big Bend. That's something that might be interesting. I'm pretty sure the whole first floor, they're going to be showing a movie on the national parks. Robert Redford narrates it, and then we're going to be doing some programming with them, so definitely look out for that too. So lots of good stuff with the parks. So definitely stay and ask questions if you want. Fill out forms, and thank you guys so much for coming. Everybody, enjoy your trip and be safe. Did you
What about the REI treks? Would you actually take groups out and do the whole planning for them?
So there's REI Adventures, and we really wanted there to be an official REI Adventures Big Bend trip, and we just couldn't get it together in time. I think that's something that's going to happen in the future, but kind of our way to still be involved was to just do this whole let's just go and and talk to the people when they're there. But I would write it down and say I would love an REI adventure to Big Bend. And the quads too. That's kind of a thing. How many national parks are there in Texas? There's actually 2. There's Big Bend and Guadalupe Mountains National Park, which is also completely amazing and beautiful. And in about an 8-hour trip just the opposite way. So, I mean, something to think about and something that I bet REI will be involved in soon.
You did a great job.
Yeah, thank you guys. No, thank you. I hope everybody's excited. I'm crazy excited because I get to leave Wednesday. And then I'll be back in April. So, yeah, thank you guys. And feel free, you're welcome to come look at any of this stuff here. If anybody wants back issues, it's the May 2015. They did a huge spread in Texas Monthly about Big Bends. Totally worthy of checking out kind of what other people think. So that's the map that I recommend. I mean, if you're, it's, it's not Geo, it's the way to go.
You guys send it down.
We do, yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah,